Hi, I'm Sara Delaney with One Big Happy Yarn Company, and we are diving into Crescent shawls. You can see them behind me there. So excited about this one. This episode is our knit Crescent shawl, and it's perfect if you kind of want to break out of scarves, you're ready for something a little more challenging, you want to try a little bit of lace, but you are not ready for lace weight yarn. You're going to love this project. Let's talk about our supplies. We are going to be working with Cascade Magnum yarn. This is so fluffy and squishable and lofty. And when we say lofty when we're talking about yarn, that refers to like how airy and light a yarn is. The Magnum is a super bulky yarn. So you can see like it's almost as big as my pinky finger. It is a super bulky yarn. That's a number 6 yarn, but it's not heavy, and while it takes up a lot of physical space, it's not thick. It's not rope-like. It's actually, you can see I can compress it really flat between my fingers. If I wanted to twist it together, it can actually get a lot smaller if I put a lot of twist on it. But we want this fluffiness, like this big, light, airy. It's like the marshmallow of yarn, right? We love that. So for this project, you need 2 of these mega skeins of the Magnum, which are fantastic. And we've got some great colors, some really nice solids, some heathered colors. Then your needles. You are gonna need size 11 needles, which are chunkity chunky. And that needs to be a circular needle on a 40-inch cable because we have to fit all the stitches from that shawl onto this cable and be able to knit it from side to side. So you could go as long as a 60-inch if you have that, but you don't want to be any shorter than 40 or you're gonna have a real hard time fitting that whole shawl on your needle. Then you're gonna need stitch markers because we are gonna do some short rows. And if you've never done short rows before, stitch markers are seriously your best friend in a project like this because we're gonna do some wraps and turns. If you haven't done them before, this will be a process where you can learn how to recognize them, but the stitch markers will help you in that. You will also need a tapestry needle, and you're gonna need a jumbo needle because this yarn is so thick. So this is the Clover Bent Tip Jumbo Needle, Jumbo. And of course, scissors. I like these little folding scissors that we have. They travel real well, and they're super sharp. What else might you need? Not that you need it, but I highly recommend you have a yarn swift. This yarn these skeins are so big. I mean, there's 100 some odd. Hold on, I'll tell you how many yards are on here. There's a lot. There are 123 yards in each of these skeins. Again, you're gonna need 2 of these skeins. And it's such a bulky yarn that you won't be able to wind it on a small regular sized ball winder unless you wind it into 2 or 3 different cakes of yarn. And I hate breaking up yarn because I'm not a huge fan of all the ends to weave in. So when I made both of these projects, I just knit next to my yarn swift. So you can see we've got the blue skein on the swift back there. I found the end and I just knit from the swift and I let the swift spin while I was knitting. Or you could wind the yarn into a ball by hand. Now, when you put a whole skein of this yarn into a ball, it's gonna be about this big. So you're gonna wanna use that big old popcorn bowl that you have to sort of put the ball in that because you don't want it rolling around in the living room. So that's prep for this project. Let's dive into the stitches. You are gonna cast on 66 stitches. Now that is not the full width of the shawl. So those 66 stitches are gonna begin to build the length of our shawl, and then our short rows are gonna build out some of that width, and then we'll add some additional length before we get into our lace edging. And the lace edging on this is a knit on edging. So it's actually worked at a 90-degree angle to the edge. It's so much fun. You're gonna have so much fun with me. Just stick with me. So I'm gonna do a long tail cast on. And if you've never done a long tail cast on before, we do have a stitch support video. We'll put the link above for you. And I'm just gonna cast on a couple of stitches. You can see how quick and easy this goes with this bulky yarn. Oh, this Magnum from Cascade is it's really lovely to work with. It's kind of buttery. Okay, so I've got bunch of stitches cast on. If you haven't worked with a circular needle that's this long before, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but you'll get there, especially by the end of this project. All right, once you've cast on, you're going to knit the first row. And don't do it with your tail, because you're not going to get anywhere with that. You want to make sure you're using your working yarn. I'm just going to move my working yarn over here since that's where it wants to come from. And this is just sort of your setup row, and sort of gets you in the right place for this project. Also, because this is the wrong side of your work, this row. This project is all in garter stitch, so there are no purls until we get to the lace section. So 95% of this project is just knit stitches, which is great. We love a good garter stitch project. Okay, row 2, you're going to knit across until you are 2 stitches from the end of the row. Now for me, that's, I don't know, 10, 12 stitches that I have here. For you, that's 64 stitches because we cast on 66 to start. So you're going to go until you have 2 stitches left, and then we're going to do our first wrap and turn. So, all right, here we are, 2 stitches left. Wrap and turn. We're going to wrap the next stitch and then turn our work over. So we're going to bring our yarn between the needles to the front. We are going to slip the stitch from the left needle onto the right needle purlwise. So we're not twisting the stitch at all, it's just sliding over. Then we're going to bring the yarn to the back through the needles, and then I usually push it down so it's out of the way, and I slip this stitch back over to the left needle, and then I turn my work. And then you can see our working yarn has gone around the stitch over here. Now we're going to bring it back to the back, and now that yarn has completely wrapped around this stitch. And then we're going to put a stitch marker in. And that just goes on the needle, just like that. It's going to live right there. I'm going to pop my tail back out there, the tail of my needle, because that's more comfortable for me. You can have it towards yourself, just figure out what's most comfortable for you. And then the next row, we're going to work across. Wait a minute, Sarah, you didn't finish working that row. I didn't, because these are short rows. Every time you go back and forth, it's going to get a little bit shorter and a little bit shorter and a little bit shorter. When we do that, we're building out the width in that middle of the shawl without making the whole thing equally wide. It's going to get wider in the middle and stay shallow at the edges. So we're going to work across to 2 stitches before the end, which for you will be 62 stitches, if my math is correct. For me, it's like 6. All right, here we are. 2 stitches from the end. We're going to do another wrap and turn. Yarn to the front, slip the stitch, yarn to the back, slip the stitch, and now that you understand what's happening, I'm going to bring the yarn back to the front, because when I turn it over, it will be in the back. I'm going to put another stitch marker, and I'm going to knit across to 2 stitches before the wrap and turn that we did last time. And that stitch marker that we put in last time tells us where that is. So it's 2 stitches before the stitch marker, because this stitch is the stitch that we wrapped. So we've got 2 stitches before we get there, and now we're ready to wrap again. To the front, slip the stitch, to the back, slip it back, yarn to the front, flip your work over, pop in a stitch marker. You're gonna need some stitch markers. Now you don't have to use the jumbo clover stitch markers that I have here. You could use a scrap of yarn. You could use, if you do upholstery and you do curtains, there's those little plastic curtain rings. You could use those. Anything that slips comfortably over your needle and that will move along with your stitches, you can use this as a stitch marker. You can tie a bunch of loops in a different yarn and use those. It's just a visual reminder. It's not structural. You're not using the stitch markers to hold anything in place. It's just a visual reminder of what happened there. I'm going to knit across to 2 stitches before the next stitch marker. I'm going to do the wrap and turn again. And you're going to keep doing that until you have 20 stitches between the last 2 markers that you've placed. Now we're going to start to work back across those wraps and turns, picking them up and working them and getting wider and wider as we go. So here's the next row. We're going to work across to this stitch marker. We're going to take that stitch marker out now. We don't need it anymore, but now we need to work the wrap. So if you didn't have that stitch marker there and you were just working along, you might not notice that this was a wrapped stitch, which is why I had you use those stitch markers. Once you've been doing this for a while, if you've done some projects with wraps and turns, you will begin to recognize. If you look at these two stitches, you'll see what's different. This stitch has one purl bump underneath it. This one looks like it has two. That's because this is the purl bump and that's the wrap. Can you see the difference there, that there's two? So we need to pick up that wrap and knit it together with the stitch, because if we don't, there's a gap here. There's a really visible gap here between these two stitches that if you just knit, it looks like a hole in your work. So what we're going to do is we're going to slip this stitch over to the right hand needle, and then you can see the difference between these two loops a little bit easier. This one is definitely looser. This one is definitely part of the fabric. Like when you pull on it, it moves. This one does not. We're going to take our left needle up underneath that wrap. See it? And then we're going to slip that and the stitch back over to our left hand needle. It's okay if they're a little bit crisscrossed. That's perfectly fine. And then you're just going to knit them together. Just like that. See that? Oh, nice. And then you're going to knit the next stitch. And then there's a stitch marker. So we're going to do the same thing. So you're going to work all the way across to the end on this side, working all of your wrapped stitches until you get to the end. We'll pick that wrap up here, slip it back on, knit those two together, all the way across to the end. Look at that. Then we're going to turn our work and we're going to work across the other direction, picking up all those wrapped stitches as we get to them. I'll show you the last two on here just so you see it a couple more times. There we are at a stitch marker. We're going to pick that up and the wrap, slide them back over, knit them together, and finish your way across. Now you can see, if I slide this up here, we only did a couple of short rows and some wraps and turns, but you can see how much wider it is there in that section than it is out here at the edges. Let me bring the shawl down here so you can see the whole thing. All right, let me show you here in the finished shawl. So you can see, I think you can see here, there's just a smidgen of a ridge that looks like it appears here. And that's because this is where we were doing those short rows. We built this section here that gets narrower and narrower out to here. That's what we were doing with those short rows and the wraps and turns. That makes the center of this long shawl a little bit wider than it is out at the edges. Now we're going to move on to this band here because we're going to keep getting wider at the edges here before we add on that lace. Let me show you how that goes. All right. Once you've finished all your wraps and turns and your short rows, we're going to do just some simple increasing at each edge of the shawl until we get to 90 stitches on your needles. So we're going to go from 66 stitches to 90 stitches. We didn't actually add any stitches when we were doing those short rows. We're going to begin to add them here. So our very first stitch, we're going to knit in the front and then we're going to knit in the back. So we're going to get 2 stitches out of this one stitch. So into the stitch, knit as normal, but don't slide it off your left-hand needle. You're going to swing around to the back and knit into the back of the same stitch so that we get 2 stitches out of that one stitch that existed before. Then you're going to knit all the way across to the other side and you're going to do the same thing. Again, this goes much faster for me because I only have about 12 stitches. You're going to have 60 plus stitches and you're going to be building out until you get to 90. When you get to the last stitch at the other end, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to knit into the front, swing around knit into the back of the same stitch. And you're going to flip the work and you're going to do the same thing. Knit front and back, knit to the last stitch, knit front and back until you have 90 stitches on the needles. Go ahead and continue that and then join me back here and we'll start our knitted on lace edging. How you feeling with all those stitches on the needle? It gets pretty heavy once it gets to that side, but now we're going to get into the fun part for me. I love a knitted on edge. So let me just show you on the little piece here what we're going to be doing. So we're currently on the back side. We're going to cast on a few more stitches and then we're going to begin to work lace this way. So it's like 90 degrees to the way that it was happening before. It's kind of mind-blowing and hard to wrap your brain cells around it when we start, but it'll really make sense when we get going. So we are going to cast on an additional 12 stitches. And we can't do that separately and then join it in. It doesn't make sense. You'll have ends that you'll need to weave in. So what we're going to do is a knitted on or cable cast on. We are going to go into the first stitch and knit like we normally would. Pull that through, but then we're going to put it back on the needle. And then our right hand needle is still in this stitch, so we're just going to slip it underneath the left hand needle, tighten up our yarn a little bit, not tight, but just so that it's not loosey-goosey, just so it's snug around both needles. Yarn over like we're knitting another stitch, bring it through, put it on your left hand needle. Your right hand needle is still in there. We're going to do this 12 times because we're adding 12 stitches. Go ahead and work on that. Adding 12 stitches. You can pause this if you need to, and then hit play when you're ready for the next step. Once you've got those 12 stitches cast on, we are ready to start the lace. And it starts really easy. You're going to knit 11 stitches and then you're going to knit 2 together. So right where you finished those 12 stitches that you cast on, you're just going to knit your way back across 11 of them. And then you're going to knit 2 together. But Sarah, we cast on 12 stitches. Why? That's 13 stitches. Yes, it is 13 stitches. Your lace edge motifs, and it's a sawtooth motif. So we're actually working this here. Each one of these is what we're going to be knitting. It's 12 stitches wide, but we want it to eat up all of these stitches that are on our needles, and we do that 1 stitch at a time with those knit 2 togethers. So you're knitting 11 stitches, and then you're going to knit 2 together. So let's double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then we're going to knit 2 together. Then you're ready for row 2 of the lace. Now there is a chart for this as well as written instructions. I'm really visual, so the charts work really well for me, but if you need the written instructions, those are there for you as well. Feel free to use whichever part of the pattern works best for you. You want to make sure that your yarn is to the back. We're going to knit 3. Then we're going to yarn over. Then we're going to knit 2 together. And then we're going to yarn over twice. 1, 2. This gives us a nice big space in the lace. And then we're going to knit 2 together. We're going to knit 2. Yarn over, knit 2, yarn over, knit 1. Then you turn your work over. Now the odd numbered rows of your lace are where we get to do the purl stitch, and it's actually kind of fun. So let me show you what that is. So this is row 3. We're going to start with knit 3. 1, 2, and then 3. But this is the double yarn over. So the third knit happens in the first yarn over. You slide it off, that other yarn over still exists, that other yarn over gets a purl. So the only time you're doing purl stitches in this lace pattern are picking up that second yarn over on our way back on the odd numbered rows. Now we're going to knit 2. No, we're knitting 4, sorry. 1, 2, 3. Here we're at that double yarn over again. This is the 4th knit, and then we have a purl 1. So we drop that first yarn over, and we go right into a purl. Then we're going to knit 3. No, we're going to knit 2. Watch your pattern, not me. We're going to knit 2, then we're going to yarn over, and then we're going to knit 2 together twice. So there are technically 3 stitches left in this row of your lace pattern, but then we also have to pick up 1 more stitch from the shawl. So we knit 2 together twice. And then we're going to turn the work and do row 4 of the lace pattern. And I'm going to show you this row, and then we'll skip ahead a little bit. We're going to knit 3, yarn over, knit 2 together, knit 1, yarn over twice. That's just kind of fun to do. Knit 2 together, knit 3, yarn over twice. And so you're going to keep following your lace pattern with those fun double yarn overs, and then the knit and purl into those on your way back until you get to row 9. And then I will show you how we finish off a sawtooth in row 9 that sets us up to do the next sawtooth in the lace pattern. All right, so you've gotten through row 8, which has a nice run of knit stitches at the end. And I'm going to show you when we start row 9, we're going to bind off. We're going to bind off 8 stitches. So you knit the first 2, and you're going to lift this rightmost stitch up and over. So that's 1 stitch bound off. Knit. That's 2 stitches bound off. Knit. That's 3 stitches bound off. Knit. That's 4 stitches bound off. So you're going to do a total of 8. This is what creates that sawtooth pattern. That was 5. This is 6. That's 7. I think I split my yarn there. I did. That happens occasionally. Just start your stitch over. That's 8. Then you're going to finish your way across row 9 until you get back to where you'll have your knit 2 together that anchors you into the body of your shawl. See that? Now this isn't all 9 rows. I just did a couple just to show you what's happening, but here, let me bring the actual shawl over and show you. So that was our 9 rows bound off, and then you begin to add extra stitches in with your double yarn overs. The double yarn over with the knit and the purl into it creates this really pretty twisted effect in those big yarn over spaces, isn't it? It's just so pretty. It's so pretty. All right, so you're going to continue that way. You're just basically working over those 12 stitches back and forth and back and forth. You increase a little bit with every one of those 8 rows. Then you bind off in the 9th row. You're back to the number of stitches that you started in row 1. You keep working rows 2 through 9 until you have worked sawtooths all the way across to the end. And your pattern will tell you which row to bind off on. And then I want to talk to you about blocking, because this does not look like this when you first take it off your needles. you are definitely going to need to block this. Anytime that you work a lace project, you are going to need to block your work. And if this was lace weight, then I would tell you that you could wet block your work. You want to soak it in Eucalan or a wool wash of some kind, and then pin it out and block it. But because this is such a bulky yarn, you don't want to soak this in a wool wash because it will absorb the Mississippi River worth of water, and it will take 2 weeks to dry out. So blocking mats are fantastic for a project like this because it's really kind of an awkward shape. You could block, like I've blocked stuff on a guest room bed, somewhere that it can sort of sit for a bit. These puzzle piece blocking mats are great because you can turn them into any shape that you need. This is nice and long, but also not super wide. Some shawls are really wide. So this sort of lets you puzzle piece out the shape that you need. Let's see, is that going to give us enough width? That is going to give us enough. Well, length, I should say. But then I need a little bit more here. So let's see, that's the center of my shawl. So we'll stick a puzzle piece in there that way. And another one here. And we'll see if that gives us enough. Because for this piece, I am going to steam block this shawl. You are going to need pins, blocking pins, which for steam blocking, I actually recommend these heat resistant sewing pins. So the little plastic on them just does not melt, which is great. I'm also going to use blocking wires. These are fantastic for shawl projects because you don't want to have to pin out every point on this. You'll have 900 pins in here. It'll take you forever. Your fingers will hurt. Your wrists will hurt. Blocking wires are just that. They're wires that you use to block. To keep a nice straight edge, for the straight edge, start at the edges. I'm just going to show you here. You want to start at the point, but I'm going under like the top 2 strands, and I'm going to go sort of back and forth every other stitch like that, all the way across the top edge. Now this blocking wire is not long enough for that, but I can use one on one half, bring the other one in, sort of overlap them in the middle, and then what I can do is bring my pin in and pin just underneath the edge of the wire like that. And I can put a pin like every 2-3 inches, right? Like that. Then, this is the fun part. This is seriously the fun part for me with blocking. I'm going to take the blocking wire and I'm just going to go through the point of each sawtooth. Just like that. Just the point. See that? And then let me slide this up here so you can see it. Get the rest of these out of here. So here, now I can pull on the wire and it opens up the lace. And then I can put my pins to where they hold the wire in place, and that holds the lace open. And so once the pins are in, you can see that the wire holds everything open. Then you can go ahead and hit this with a steamer. You can just get a simple little steamer. I think I picked mine up at a pharmacy. It was like 20 bucks. And you're just gonna run over this whole thing with steam and then walk away from it for like a half an hour. The great thing with steamers is you would think that by steaming it, it's going to make your work wet, but it's so hot that the steam evaporates. But in the process, it resets the stitch memory of your yarn. So when you come back and you unpin and you slide those blocking wires out. There'll be a little bit of recoil. You'll get a little bit of shrinkage back, but not nearly as much as you think you would. And then your shawl is in beautiful shape. That lace is all opened up, and it'll be nice and dry and nice and cool and nice and cozy, and you can wrap up in it. One of the things I love about these Crescent shawls is I'm sort of a weighted blanket girl. Not that there were weighted blankets when we were kids, were there, ladies? But I sort of need lots of blankets at night to sleep under and sort of hunker down at night. And so sometimes a shawl like this, which there isn't a whole lot to it, but it's just a little bit heavy, feels so much cozier than something that fully covers me. And so this is great with, well, let's see, if you had a shawl pin, or a random crochet hook, you can just pin it in place and wear it. And you can see the lace in the back. You can also wear them like a cowl, where you take sort of the short edge and then disappear. Get nice and cozy inside of it. So that is our knit Crescent shawl. I hope that you have had fun creating this project with me. If you want to bring your crocheter friends along, or if you are by Craft Jewel and you want to crochet one of your own, you want to join me for the second episode in our crochet shawl series, where we will be doing the crochet Crescent shawl that's still hanging up behind me. I hope that you've had as much fun with this project as I have. If you haven't yet, you can pick up a kit at onebighappy.com or at the link in the description below. And we look forward to seeing you in another episode. Make sure that you hit the bell below to be notified when a new episode airs, and make sure that you subscribe. I hope to see you in future episodes. Happy knitting!